So welcome. For those who don't know, we have this fantastic team. We have Shari, we have Abby, Gina, and Leighton. I have another one of my staff who's actually over at the other side right now, getting things ready. Well, so, yeah. So we'll meet that later. So you will be seeing what, sorry, I should back up a second. You will be seeing what really nobody else has done to this point. In discussing with other elections officials around the country, looking at systems, looking at how early voting is done in other jurisdictions, nobody has come to this level of sophistication and technology like we have. Now, I know, and I'm not just talking about the BMD unit. That in itself is an incredible device, and everybody I talk to just goes, wow, really? But the whole coordination of what has been done by this group here to make sure all this works in 1,000 vote centers over 10 days, it actually blows my mind. I was up about 3:30 this morning thinking about it. So they have pulled off a Herculean task, and let me come in here real quick. And we are going to be going over a lot of data for you. Leighton, did you pass out the sheets already? Okay. And some of you will have binders. So what's going to happen is we have a lot of data that we're going to be going over, and we have sheets with information as to all the different touch points we'll be getting on, as well as for those in front, we have binders with a lot of the information that we'll be presenting. So, as you know, beforehand, we had the 5,000 polls. There was very little technology. The only sophisticated items in the polls were, of course, the ballot marking device and the audio ballot box. And we're replacing that with super high tech 1,000 mini Norwalk offices that'll be distributed around the county for 10 days. They're all connected. They will have setup, and they'll be required to be maintained and working perfectly. So we will be essentially tracking staff, because we've got staff to go out and do this. We've got to track them all over the county. We'll be handling issues, and we'll be doing this over 10 days. So, just a real quick recap of what we've done so far. Test Lab 1, we went in an overview of our implementation plan, trying to figure out how it is we're going to deploy 30,000 ballot marking devices and 17,000 e-poll books to 1,000 vote centers over 10 days. We also went over some basic troubleshooting scenarios, trying to figure out exactly how that's going to work. Test Lab 2, we had much more experience. We went through the setup, and you saw us put together 10 ballot marking devices and actually operate them, do the troubleshooting, make sure they worked. Test Lab 2.5, we added what's called chain of custody. And chain of custody is something that I've been pushing, and I know the executive leadership here is interested in as well. What I want to do is I want to say on Wednesday after the election, when some race, let's say the Hawaiian City Council race is off by 5 votes, I want to be able to say with absolute certainty that nobody got into our machines and did something nefarious to them while they were in the field. That's what's so important about that. So we also did our primary staffing allocations, determine where we're going to be, how we're going to deploy staff and where we're going to be deploying them. The goal for today is to answer any outstanding questions you may have, show you exactly what the process is going to be, and show you all the information that we've collected. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Abby, who's going to lead you in.
Good morning. Happy Friday. All right, long weekend too. All right, can you hear me? All right, so let's get started. So I'm used to you guys being on this side. I look over here and look over here. That's fine. So one of the things that you'll definitely hear about today, like Kai said, is a lot of the outstanding issues that you guys wanted to hear about. So to kind of sum it up, because I will say we're kind of talking about a bunch of different subjects today, wrapping up and kind of giving you a complete view of what we're doing. We kind of wanted to go over a reminder of what the tech support plan was. So the tech support plan has really been broken up into 3 different areas. We have our analysis, design, prototyping, and planning, which includes the system and devices and staffing and everything that falls under those. And as you can see, we have all the different systems on the side, which we had introduced to you in Test Lab 1. The second portion of that is development, testing, training, and operation. Under that falls training, call center operation, and truck yard. And then finally, the third piece of putting this all together was management and stabilization. So under that, you'll see about data collection and reporting. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start with the system and devices. So we introduced a lot of different systems in Test Lab 1, and it was more of an idea, and we've been able to begin the execution of these systems now. So we kind of wanted to provide you an update where we were at this time. So we did introduce the Sonum phones, the workforce application, ePulse, Shiftboard, and then SurveyMonkey. So in terms of Shiftboard, the update for this is we've currently gone out to RFB. RFB closed earlier this week, so we were just waiting at this time to finish executing the contract and for the vendor to come on board. So with that being said, we didn't have a system to demo for you, but we went ahead and put together parts of the demos that we've had that will show you what our customized system will look like until we have it. So Shiftboard, as a reminder, was a scheduling and communication system. For our managers, it was to create worker profiles, assign permission and access, scheduling by auto-sign, being able to delegate different groups and roles such as tally, warehouse, and then everything that falls under tech support. Be able to track compliance in terms of checking in, communication and alerts, and finally reporting. On the worker side, we gave the workers the ability to view schedules, track time, and check in and check out. So as part of this, we have a customized dashboard. As you can see here, it shows LA County's or Registrar Recorder's dashboard as it would look like. Here's where people would log in and see any kind of announcements, any kind of onboarding documents or surveys, and each team would only see what's relevant to their group. So in terms of setting up, like we had discussed earlier, we would do a mass upload. So as you see here, we have the different names of the employees listed, as well as the ability to add the single employees and then track historical employees by rating them. So if we didn't have a good one, we'd be able to see here they weren't rated that well, we probably shouldn't bring them back. So in terms of adding shifts, like we said, and during this manager view, they had the ability to upload shifts or auto-assign them either by mobile or by PC, and then based on the teams and groups, they're able to add the shift. So as you can see here, he's choosing breakdown team, the number of positions. He added a break-in because that's important, and then was finally able to auto-assign the shift. So this just shows another mobile view of how we were able to assign the shifts. So we have warehouse here. And he's able to see everyone who is scheduled on that day. We're watching the video. All right. So in terms of worker profile, this does highlight the basic information, but some highlights I wanted to bring up was the fact that we can track the contract start and end dates, as well as any kind of hour limitation that we want to put on the contractor. We are able to send a welcome letter from there, tells them their schedule, what they're expected to do, email their schedule, and even track any kind of completed training courses from there. So one of the more important things, I guess, for the department is the ability to track the financial information. So pay rate by group or role. So we have either stipend or hourly or salary. All of that is in the system, as well as whether we have to restrict overtime or if they're allowed to work overtime, and then how much of that overtime. And this is only visible to that manager. So attendance is another big thing. One of the questions that came up was how are we going to track attendance of those who are in the field? So the ability to clock in is available through mobile or through PC or any kind of kiosk. As you see up here, it does record the geolocation, and should we have any no-shows or lates, it would notify the manager after 15 minutes, and they could either override if they actually were there or just mark them as absence, and we'd be able to track that within the payroll system. So in the event that there's any kind of emergency, we are able to broadcast out a message based on the team. So that would be to anyone who's in here from the county, any kind of group, or isolate it to a team. And that is this here. This is only available to the manager or admin, so we wouldn't have any problem with someone, one of the workers, sending out a message to everyone else on the system. So one of the final things is reporting and financing. So all the hours worked, the cost, the overtime, and per person is available at any time to pull. It can be for everyone who's in the system or just the roles in the group that you would like to limit it to. This would be good for projecting costs for the election, as well as any kind of call out or quit ratios, as you can see there. So one of the next things I wanted to talk about is we had introduced Dial My Calls, and we were going to use Dial My Calls in order to get vote center data in terms of setup and breakdown. So after exploring, we found that Dial My Calls was not exactly what we needed it to be. We had multiple questions that we wanted to ask, and unfortunately, those questions would come back in a bulk answer, so one bulk data. So you can imagine 1,000 vote centers trying to pull out all the relevant information. As well as we couldn't pre-schedule the calls to go out. So we could put one schedule out, but if we had to put 5 calls out in the day, we'd literally have to sit in there, set it up, and send it out. So we looked into SurveyMonkey, and we've actually moved 3 of our surveys over here. So the nice thing about SurveyMonkey is it is up to date. As part of our Sonum phones, which you'll see later, we have uploaded the link onto the phone so the tech can go straight there from their phone and do that site survey data. So those 3 things that we have there is the skill specification survey, which we talked about. That's just in order when people are coming on for onboarding, we can decide where to better allocate them to. The vote center setup and breakdown survey, which really helps us track what sites are set up, at what time it was done, and how long did it take. And it helps us in one nice dashboard be able to see where we're at, as well as the average time we're taking for setup and breakdown. And finally, post-election survey, we really want to get an idea of what did we do good, what did we do bad, what can we improve on in terms of training and materials. So I am going to show you just the one. So this is what they have on their phone. They're able to pick, these are the mock sites actually. So they're able to pick what site they're at. And if they were able to set up a breakdown, then we want them to specify whether it was a setup or breakdown, because we want to see if there's a difference in times. If they weren't able to, they're able to pick the reason why, but since they were, we put NA. And then how long it took. So you can go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. Thank you. So once they do that, it automatically records it, and I can see on a dashboard, okay, this vote center is now set up. It took this long. I can see how many more we have left, and I can also see, this is one of the questions right here, I can also see how many no's we've had that day. So it was a good move away from Dial My Calls. So one of the other things we introduced in Test Lab 1 was Workforce. We were requested to demo that, so you will be seeing that later this afternoon. In terms of incident management, assignment routing to level 1, and a dispatcher versus a troubleshooter view. So currently we have acquired licenses for the Mock-In pilot, and the VSAP tech support instance for Workforce has been set up as of now. As part of Workforce, we were asked to come up with the coverage area maps. This is Test Lab 3. As you can see here, an example, this is all the different 3 sites that we have, as well as the geographical boundary that goes around it that we'd be giving out to the techs. This time I'm going to hand it to Gina, who's going to talk about the Sonum devices.
everyone. As we mentioned in Test Lab 1, 2, and 2.5, we are going with Sonum, and Sonum comes with an integrated MDM-like solution, which is what we are going to use to set up the phones. We don't have to go and individually touch every single phone, so we're going to set this up on a web-based application and push it out to every single phone, and that's it. That's all we have to do when setting the phones up. We've already, our current state with that is we've already acquired the phones. We have some phones in stock, have already been set up, and you will see them used during the demo. We've worked really hard, hand in hand with ISD, to get approved to use the FirstNet, and that's already set. We're going to be using FirstNet for our level 1 staff, as well as our bartender leads and our EOC workers. So we have all that in place with three different accounts.
Mention what FirstNet is.
FirstNet?
Yeah.
It's a network used by first responders, and it has something like a subset for primary extended, which is basically the same thing, but it's allowed. Other companies can use it that are not first responders. So with us, we fall into it using the election critical code. That's why we were allowed to use it. So this is how we get to use it. We've
created prior to channel. Set up the channel.
Right. We've also set up a with the account with AT&T. We've set up so when we're off elections, we can suspend the phones, and we're all going to be charged 99 cents per phone rather than paying the full amount per plan, which is like $40 or $60 a phone. It'll be 99 cents. This will come with additional features, which we have push to talk, as well as the geofence. Let's see what else. There's a lot of other features that you'll see as we get to use the smartphones. And one cool thing that I wanted to show you guys.
They're very sturdy. We tested dropping them.
They saw that.
Stepping on them.
You guys saw that, right? When I dropped it last time and it didn't break. So when I mentioned about how simple it is for us to set up the phone, all we have to do, we've created several profiles, depending on who's going to be using the phone. All we have to do is scan this QR code, and the phone will be set up. It'll have all the applications needed. It'll be set up with specific security codes. It'll have a password, everything that needs to be done. And if for some reason the phone gets lost, somebody walks out with it, and they try to reset it, the phone will know that it was reset, and it'll come back to its original state that we set it up. So no one's going to be able to use it. They'll have to bring it back to us, or it'll be a brick. So, ePulse, of course, you'll see a demo of that in our second demo in the other room. We'll see incident. We're going to create an incident. It'll be assigned. You'll also see how it's routed to our field tech. You'll also see how it's used in conjunction with workforce. We'll see the dispatch versus the troubleshooter view. For the future states, we are currently working with NoInc, and we've sent out some specifications of some enhancements that we would like to get for ePulse. We are asking for the inventory tracking, the user interface to be a little bit more usable the way we're used to with Sharewell. We wanted the mass data upload. At this time, we can upload the data, but it'll be more time consuming since we have to do one at a time. We would want the reports based on our KPIs and our priority matrix, and as well as our chain of custody. And like I said, that's in the works. And now I'm going to give it over to Cherie to go over the chain of custody forms.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the chain of custody forms. It's a temporary solution that we developed in lieu of ePulse until it's developed, fully functional and developed and running properly. We created a paper-based solution, and that's what this form is. If you open up your binder, it's a little funny because initially I designed these just for the IT section, and then we discovered that it was beneficial for the form to follow the life cycle of the entire device. And so that's what you'll see. And so I just want to go over a few highlights. Oh, I have the clicker. For the form. So at the top, you'll have before I talk about that, you'll see the red sections. And those sections will be, the data will be merged into it from the warehouse or the EOC before they get into the binder, because warehouse will have that information of what vote center it's going to, what asset ID, the lock number associated with it. So one sheet is per device, just so that we understand that, so that it follows, in the event that we do have to look up the history, that we can pull one page and it'll follow the entire life cycle of that one device. And you'll see that the midday portion demonstrated later. So at the top is the vote center. The vote center name, the vote center ID, the BMD asset number, and then the seal that is associated with that BMD device. Those will all be merged into the form before it arrives at the voting center location. The one thing that will not be merged into it is the lock number, because we actually place the locks on each BMD as we're setting up. So that will be handwritten in. And like I said, you have below that 2 signatures from our team, because it's a dual signature process. And then right below that, you have the opening, midday, and closing, which you'll see later on in the presentation, and then what that entails for that. And the reason why I'm going over these a little more in detail is because they won't go over it. You'll just see a reference of it. So if you have any questions about it, please ask at the end. The next form is the e-poll book form. It has the same mail merge. The only difference between this is you have the pass or fail. We will power them up, we'll pass and fail, and then we will run a test with that BAM, because the BAM will also be associated with the e-poll book. It's married. If it leaves, it will go with it. So we want to make sure that the information stays with the form. The next form is the Cradle Point form. And what I want to point out is the functional test for the e-poll book. Although this is a Cradle Point form, we want to make sure that the e-poll books are functioning before our AT&T personnel leave the voting center. I know, Dean, that's something you had asked for. You wanted to see that interaction and that sign off, and that's included in this form. The next form is an exchange form. In the event that we do need to exchange devices, this is one form that you can use for any device. You circle the device that it applies to. You insert the old damaged information, devices info, and then the new devices information, so that we know what was swapped and why. If it was software, if it was hardware. And again, those are dual signature process. You'll have to have 2 signatures for each of these forms. So in addition to the COC forms, we will cover additional new development that has not been seen. Next is the call center, which entails many, many components. So I'm going to bring Gina back up.
Okay, next we're going to talk about our call center. We've partnered with Smartmatic, who helped us come up with a lot of our solutions. We work with ISD and data analytics for historical data collection. We extracted historical data from AskGet and Finesse. We've used industry standard benchmarks. We've created KPIs, which will show the importance of a call, determine the number of staff needed for each call center during a specific election. We created CTIs. We've created priority matrix and service level agreements. And we've also created skill groups within our Finesse call center. KPIs, key performance indicators. So key performance indicators will be used for, will determine the time to answer a call. It'll also look at average abandonment rate, transfer rate, hold time, first contact resolution, which are all very important numbers that we need to read when we want to allocate staff for future call centers and any future elections. This will be measuring the health of our call center, identify areas that need improvement. It will also help us identify the number needed to improve our goals, the number of staff needed to improve our goals, and focus on low performance and encourage self-monitoring. Again, this is just an overview of our KPIs, and you have them on your handout so you could see more in detail of what it is. But as you can see, we're focusing on the time it takes to answer a call. It's looking at the performance objective, benchmarks, industry standards, and this is all coming from our Cisco phone system. This is just a second part of our KPIs. Like I said, they're on your handout. And now we've also created our CTIs, which are category type solutions that will be used by our call center staff, our level 0 staff. And these are used, this will help us make data-driven decisions. It enables us to customize solutions, create reports. And these are some examples of some of the ones that we have. And again, those are part of your handout. These are incorporated into our incident management solution right now. So if someone were to call in with any type of issue, all these categories are there. All they have to do is try to figure out if it's a router call, they'll go router and see if there's an error code, and it'll come up with a possible solution. So this is how it'll help our level 0 staff try to resolve the issue without having to escalate it. But if it needs to be escalated, then it could also be done, and we can track that using this. We've worked with ISD to develop a reporting dashboard that would that will display real-time data. So if by any chance somebody walks by, they could see our dashboard. They could see how many agents we have connected, how many are on a call. They can see how many calls we have on hold the whole time. If we've had any drop calls, it'll show all this information when somebody just passes by and looks at our dashboard. It will also display data for our skill groups that are associated with our call center. So we have our VSAP call center and a couple of skill groups associated, which are going to be used for our level 2 support. This is just a sample of some of our reporting modules, which is associated with the KPIs. So all the KPIs that we've created, these are the reports associated with them. Now going into our actual call center. We have multiple call centers, and one of the ones that we have is at our transitional facility. We've actually gone in there and took measurements, making sure to keep a 3-foot work area space around each staff member, keeping in mind staying within ADA compliance. Each workstation will be equipped with 2 monitors, a PC, and a phone. And they'll be working with multiple databases. This is why we need both screens, so they can toggle from application to application, so they can stay on top of everything. We've developed a priority matrix, and this is something else that we work with Smartmatic to create. So this priority matrix will provide definite range to determine issue severity, It'll provide team alignment and uniformity as a group to identify the most efficient path for a solution. It will also help us keep the project on track while optimizing time and resources. And the priority matrix focuses on, it uses a scoring mechanism, and there's a response guide that we've attached to it, which will help our agents kind of rate each call so we know the severity level of it. And just something for you to know, we are going to print out the matrix, and it'll be set at each workstation, making it visible to our agents when they're taking a call. We're also going to have a poster-like matrix on the wall, just in case they lose what they had at their desk. And this is the example of the priority matrix. I believe that's also on your handout, so you can see what it is. So let's say we had a call come in, and they're reporting that we have an issue at a call center or a vote center where over half of the BMDs are down. It could be a power issue, whatever issue it is, but we know that it's over 20% of them, so we will score that with a 3. And on the scope and on the goodwill. So they'll say, well, the call came in and the line's getting longer and longer. Voters are getting impatient. So we'll see, and we'll give it another score on the goodwill as well. And then we'll go and look at the operations. Is this interfering with the operation? Is it stopping it, or can they continue it? So based on all of that, we'll pick and choose the points. And there's another one, an urgency. So how fast do we have to go out there? How fast do we need to resolve this issue so the operation can continue as planned? So with all of that, we get all the numbers, add them all up, and the total, if this works. Okay, there we go. So the total for this call would be a 9, right? So now we go to our point mechanism. Oh.
You want going backwards?
Backwards? Keep going. Sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. So our response guide. So we know that the call got a score of 9. So we know we're gonna put it as a high call. So 4, 5 will be our urgent calls, and if we get anything that has anything less than a 4, those are low priority for us. So obviously we're going to focus on the higher ones to resolve and get our staff out there as soon as possible. Now I'm going to hand it over to Cherie again for the training module.
Okay, so I'm going to have you keep your binders open. I see everyone looking at the PowerPoint slides, but I would like for you to follow me in the binder. It goes in order of the PowerPoint, so you won't lose any information. So in developing the training model, we did an assessment to determine what content would we need to teach these individuals. There's systems we need to teach them, there's processes we need to teach them, and there's fact, and there's all these components that have to come together very quickly to train. So these are the kind of goals that we came up with. Of course, we're going to have them deploy, support, and break down. That's the objective here. They're going to be in an associated role, which would be part of the setup team, the field support technician, the FST, the call center team, or the breakdown team. And then we wanted to put those goals and make those goals quantifiable for us to measure. That's part of the reason why we have the IT tech plan, is because we always want to go back and refine the machine and do it better next time, everything. So how do we determine quantifiable goals if we can't measure? So we set those in place so that we're always able to do that throughout each operation of what the IT team does. So we want to set up and deploy and support efficiently. We want to set up according to our strict scheduling model. This isn't a flexible item. This is something that has to be done concurrent to a strict schedule. Of course, we want to reduce the overtime. So if we train well, they work well, they work faster. And so we reduce overtime, in addition to reducing any incidences that may happen out in the field, because we want to teach them safety as well with that. So the next thing we came up with are training techniques. So under the different courses, they fall under certain categories. So we know some classes are knowledge transfer or fact, some are hands-on and role-playing, some are blended learning and role-based. And then even further, it falls under behavior. Are we teaching them how to act while they're out in the field? And then the guidelines that they have to go by while they're out in that field. And then, of course, the process and procedures of what they're supposed to be doing. And then the materials that we came up with are, of course, training guides, quick reference guides, PowerPoints, videos, and quizzes, of course, to measure the learning capacity. How well did we do? So our courses that we came up with are of course, the LA County onboarding process, which includes defensive driving, heat safety, and safely lifting. We also have a VSAP orientation that we'll do. This is a pretty big project. And so to just bring someone on and them not understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, the development, how long it's taken, the hard work that's been put into it, we go over all of that in our own VSAP orientation. And then scheduling and timekeeping, how they clock in and clock out, whichever system that we're using, whether it's paper-based or system-based. BMD assembly, e-poll book assembly, e-polls, which is a beast, but we've narrowed it down, and we're going to teach on that as well. Call center. Now, call center has two pull-out roles, because there are two distinct roles that you'll see later on in the demonstration, where we will specify a person to be our dispatcher and our inbound, outbound caller, because we don't want our call center, our main call center people to have to stop to call, get out of queue, have to call back or follow up with a vote center. We want specific people doing that specific role, and in their downtime, they would also be a part of the original call center teams. And then the truck yard coordinator, how do we get our vehicles in and out? Who's coordinating that? Who's keeping track of them? Who's refueling them? And all those processes. And then, of course, IT FST. This is the biggest one, because this teaches everyone how to put all of those components together. What does your day look like? So that's a big course for us. Coming up with the schedule. How and when we're going to train. So we intentionally merged our training schedule flush with deployment, because we didn't want downtime. We wanted to minimize cost. So it is the week before deployment. So we will have a certain amount of days to teach them, and then they will go right into deployment. Let's go over that a little bit. So we have our HR, ePulse, call center, IT, FST, BMD. And then on this optional day, if you could see it on a Saturday, it's optional. It'll be a makeup day in the event that anyone missed one of those classes, that they'll have the availability to take the class during that Saturday, as well as a lab day. So we will have them having that hands-on training that we talked about. They'll be able to set up and break down and just use the full day as a lab day to get familiar with the devices. And then lastly, the last day, before we go out for deployment, is an assimilation day. So this will be a scheduled hour where we would time our teams, because they will already be in their teams, they will already be assigned, but we're going to time them to see who are the quicker teams. And based on that information, we will assign the larger teams, the faster teams, to the larger sites. And of course, we have a buffer day, because you always have to expect the unexpected, right? So next, I want to talk about the fast track. So sometimes you need more help than you anticipated, and you need to pull people on, and we need to train them fast. And so we created a fast track class with condensed materials, all those components that we talked about earlier, putting them together and teaching it in one class in one day. So that's just going to be our fast track portion. It'll be available. It'll be probably more videos and lots of hands-on, but it'll be moving forward in a faster capacity. Next, I want to talk about, this is the training model that I developed for primary. I developed it for primary and I worked backwards for mock. So this is a training model where we created treks. And so there's a purple trek. I know the toner is a little off, but there's a purple trek, an orange trek, a yellow trek, and a green trek. And so we will have all of these classes going on. The first day would be your P1 class, if you're looking at the binder. So all those 4 classes will be taking the same class the same day, but in different rooms because of the capacity of the rooms. And so, and then the next one will be the call center, and so forth and so on for each class. So the next slide is an example of what their schedule would look like. So the purple trek would be the top row, and then the orange trek, and then so they would get their schedules and know exactly where they need to go and when. In addition to the time slot at the bottom to schedule for their simulation day. Now I will hand it over to Layton to talk about our truck yard.
So, since guys like trucks, I could talk about trucks. It's this middle button, right?
The arrow to the right.
So, with a new increased technical presence in our voting experience, there's going to be a need for deploying technical teams than ever before, and we have to have a place to deploy these teams from. So we're coming up with a strategy to deploy VSAP tech support for deployment and support. We're coming up with a strategy to have two truck yards ideally because of the vast size of LA County. Ideally, we want a north truck yard somewhere in the valley that would handle Valley, Santa Clarita, and Lancaster type areas. And then one closer to here will probably be here, down in Norwalk area, to handle everything south of the 10 versus north of the 10. Okay. The primary responsibility of the truck yard is for fleet parking of our vehicles and for staff parking for them to leave their vehicles when they switch out. Daily procedures will include a kiosk for the truck yard coordinator, as mentioned earlier. They will be issuing vehicles to the staff. There will be an inspection process and the logs to fill out. There will be a supplies restock because our teams will have a supply, like a tech tub that you've probably seen in the last test labs. And we are in talks now with ISD to get on the refueling process, the AFMIS process for refueling. And we're still working out those details with ISD now. But hopefully that process can be used. We're working out. And in that case, an employee would be assigned a PIN number. And there's, I believe, 60 different gas stations in the county that they'll be able to go to, key in the PIN number and get gas. So there's some technical difficulty there. It's a numbers game. So we're hoping to work on that one. So we're in talks with ISD on that now and transportation. So we did some scouting. We did some scouting. We looked at a truck yard here close to us, Rancho Los Amigos. That site has parking for 180 parking spaces. We also went there for a nighttime visit because that facility is not in use right now. There's nothing really there. So we went there to assess lighting needs for nighttime use. We also will schedule facilities for cleanup. It's not in the greatest condition at this present time, but we need to find a place to park. We are evaluating a site in the North County in Sylmar. There's parking spaces at that site for 80 to 120 vehicles, and we will be scheduling a site visit soon. As mentioned earlier, we also will have a new role, a new job. Will be a VSAP tech support truck yard coordinator. They'll be in charge with issuing vehicles to staff and keeping our tech tub stocked. On the daily basis, staff will check in They will obtain their assignment, they will obtain their vehicles, they'll inspect the vehicles and their tech hub, and proceed to their first sites for support over deployment. During the midday, they will be doing those activities, setting up or supporting or breaking down. And at the end of the day, they will return their vehicle, do an inspection, fill in the mileage logs, replenish their tech hub, and then they'll be done for the day. Thank you.
Okay. For the last portion, we're going to go ahead and cover the staffing and deployment model. So if you remember in the beginning, we went over kind of the timeline, and I just wanted to reiterate that before I go into the staffing allocation. So phase 1, Shari talked about it, we're talking training. Our phase 2 is deployment. Once we enter into phase 3, we have other things going on. That yellow line there, that means the voting period has begun. But we're also doing deployment and support at the same time. By the time we go into phase 5, we're in the voting period, supporting through troubleshooting. And then finally, the last phase, we are in support and then finally breakdown. So with that being said, I wanted to kind of explain how we ended up coming about the model that we're using. So what we did is we began to look at it kind of as an optimization model. So what an optimization model is it looks at a problem you're trying to solve, what you're trying to accomplish, what are the constraints that you have, and gives you the best option. So we tried to approach it like that. We were working with data analytics, and we found that there was a large range of optimality. All that to say, there was multiple possible scenarios. So you can kind of see at the bottom, that whole shaded region, each dot in there would represent all the possible scenarios we could have in order to do this deployment model. So we moved on to the next thing. So in your handout, actually, right before it, you'll see we did some time studies. We worked in the MTS room with the 2 devices that Monica was so nice to let us use, ran multiple setup and breakdowns on the ePoll books as well as timed the setup and breakdown for Test Lab 2. We used that as a forum. So based on those time studies, we were able to start coming up with, it took 54 minutes to set up with 4 people for a small site. But we normally do it with 2 people, add an extra hour for the double help, and we didn't do chain of custody, so that's how we got to 3 hours for a small, 4 hours for medium, and then 5 hours for a large, since we were at 54 minutes for 10 BMD devices at 4 people. So from there, we took the data that we talked about for call center, that data from Cisco. So we pulled November 2016 data, and we're looking at how many calls were we expecting to see, how many calls were isolated to the groups that took in device calls, and what % of those should we expect moving into the 2020 election. The next thing we did is we partnered with AT&T in order to get historical site unavailability rate. We wanted to know, when are these sites not available? When should we expect to have to revisit? So AT&T was nice enough to track this as they were going out and doing site surveys, and found a 5.7%. But we wanted another point of view. We wanted to see, historically, what about early voting? How many sites were unavailable? We found about 20%. So then we started looking at industry standards for expected call out and quit ratios. We knew everyone wasn't going to show up 100% of the time. So what can we expect in terms of people quitting and calling out? After we had these assumptions, we were able to build a what-if analysis. Like I said, we couldn't treat it as an optimization model, but we could see what happens if we change the constraints every time something else happens. So this next slide will explore the 3 possible scenarios. Like I said before, there's a large range of optimality. There's many possible scenarios. This is only merely 3 snapshots of what it could be. As well, for each scenario, at the bottom, you'll see there are assumptions. And as those assumptions change and we get more information, the model will change. It's meant to be dynamic. And as I said before, this will be a baseline for continuous improvement. So as we work with Alex's group, we'll refine the assumptions and the model and build upon it. So before I get into the actual model, because call center was such a special in its own calculation, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what we use in order to feed it into the model. So we have the call center agent calculator. Smartmatic was nice enough to help us build this. It looks at the historical data back from that November 2016 election. So we found over 77,000 calls. Around 50,000 were isolated to the groups that we were looking at that took those device calls. 25% of those, when we cross-referenced it with ASCED, were related to the actual devices itself. And that was over 10 days. So we took obviously moving forward as we get data, we expect to see that it's not going to be the same amount of call volume every day. But for this election, since we don't have what it looks like over 10 days, we take a baseline of 1261 over the amount of time. So as we get into that, we found it's about 15 minutes, we found it's about 15 minutes to accurately walk someone through a troubleshooting call, and 3 minutes is industry standard in order to wrap up a call. That's proper documentation to make sure we have data on the back end as to what happened and what solutions were put into place. In addition, we went with 75% utilization rate. People are going to take breaks. People are going to talk. People are going to use the restroom. They're not going to be productive the whole time. Based on that, we came up with the number of call center people that we would need based on that 2016 data, which came to 70. Now, this is one number in the spreadsheet, but it had its own separate calculator, so I wanted to explain it. So setting up the model. So one of the things we've kind of made it so we can plug in, like I said, the information we have there with the calls, but in addition, the historical percent of occurrence rate. So I told you site unavailability rate was 5.7%, so I plugged that in. Call out quit ratio of 5% for industry standard, and then call out to deployment ratio is 25%. Over on the side of the model, they're able to update the site size as well as setup and breakdown days, the number of RDCs, and then there's another sheet which I'm not going to show, but we went ahead and looked at all the costs of the different contractors who were coming in, removed the outliers, and then looked at lowest, average, and then the second to highest because the highest was so high. So with that being said, we move into the actual model. So this is scenario B. I like scenario B because scenario A is merely a baseline. So all those historical percent of occurrence are all at 0%. It's an ideal, perfect situation, which will never happen, but it gives us a baseline to build the model at. So, just 1 second. As you can see at the top of the model, the only thing that they actually have to add in is the number of sites, large, medium, small, that are scheduled per day. This is as we get that information from those site schedulers. As they are booked, we put them in here. From that, it does calculate down in the second area the large site teams, medium site teams, and small site teams, the number of teams that would be needed for that day in order to deploy. Now, it's good at this point to mention what the assumptions are in order to go with these teams. So for each scenario, you'll see there are different assumptions, but for this one, we assume that all RDCs are available for those 11 days in that pre-deployment period. 5.7% of those sites are unavailable for setup. 5% of the staff call out or quit. During the deployment period, we require a 1-to-4 ratio of call center staff to vote center installs. Large sites, like I said before, take approximately 5 hours based on those time studies, 4 on medium and 3 on small. Each team will install 2 sites per day, except the small, who will install 3 sites per day. Each deployment team will work approximately 10 hours. Call center will work 12. Troubleshooters will work 10. Vehicle coordinators will be in 2 8-hour shifts. And then we'll be using the average staffing cost per hour. The last assumption is that these little yellow boxes you see on the model is that all unavailable sites that we are unable to get, that all of them will be scheduled for that last day as a makeup day. So if you go down to the last and final box, it talks about the actual number of staff for each role that would be needed. So based on the sites scheduled and the number of teams, it calculates here how many staff would be needed. Like I said, some of these are a fixed ratio, especially as you get into the voting period for that call center staff. Others are based on a ratio of how many deployment staff are in the field that they need to support. And then vehicle coordinators is just a set 3 per shift, 2 shifts per day. And as you see, it keeps changing throughout the time depending on what deployment period or what period we're in, because as we said before, we have 5 different phases. Finally, at the end, we have here the total staff per day, and then the total numbers of vehicles required in order to support that staff. So one thing that we do have that I have hidden on this, it also calculates the cost per day as well as the final cost and does a comparison at the very end. What we're looking at like in cost differences moving into the final. So that was a lot of data. So I'm just going to sum it up for you in one slide. So we looked at all of this to say future data collection. We really want to make data-driven decisions on how we're going to improve, become more efficient, and give the best service to the public in terms of troubleshooting. With that being said, as a reminder, SurveyMonkey, well, what is it going to be used for? Setup and breakdown times. As you can see, it feeds back into the model. Those setup and breakdown times changes how many people we're going to need per day. That site availability rate, once again, shows us how many sites we plan to retouch. Exit survey, how we improve, how we get better, and how we keep people on board. Shiftboard gives us that call quit out ratio that we saw that fed into the model, as well as the forecasted expenses so we can make better decisions moving into the next budget year. Those KPIs that Gina talked about in call center help us control and estimate call volume, as well as troubleshooting time that's going to be used on the calls, as well as how effective are we as a level 0 through 2. Finally, we have ePulse. So ePulse helps us with those CTIs, like we said, being able to determine what's going on with the devices, what issues are we seeing, and what do we possibly need to train better on moving forward. Like I said, historical device failure rates. So with that being said, we tried to answer as many questions as we could of yours, Dean. There are a few things that we've still identified that are next steps. That's still multilingual services as we explore other options that have recently come up. Centralized dashboards, there's a lot of systems. We need to put it in one eventually. We are working toward that. Finalized systems, like I said, we've acquired almost all the systems. We're in the process of doing implementation and configuration for most of those. And then finally, continue to update that model with the information that we glean as we move on and learn. Okay. So with that being said, are there any questions?
Let's give this group a big hand.
All want to come up? Or we all?
I do want to say that it is really amazing to see the progression from Test Lab 2 to 2.5 and 3. And truly, a lot of the truly hard work that's went into this presentation. It's clear that you guys use a lot of best practices and black belt methodology in order to complete this work. So we're very proud of that. Anything offhand, Dean?
Yeah, so I'm going to echo that. I think it's super impressive and really appreciate the effort and the care that you put into this. The detail is really encouraging. And also a bit overwhelming because obviously it's really demonstrating or illustrating, I think, to all of us how much is involved in this. So it's useful in that sense as well. So thank you for that. I think that you answered a lot of my questions and gave me a lot of material that I can continue to go through. So just a few observations. I do have some questions as we go forward with how we're going to manage the logistics of the contract workers, and so like in terms of shiftboard and onboarding and all that, what's going to be the relationship between your team and our HR team? Are you going to be the contract administrator for the technical staffing contract, or is that going to be separate from HR, or what's the relationship there? You don't have to answer that now. It's just a. Okay, if you may.
Right. So actually, we've been working very closely with HR to make sure there's no kind of disparity. We actually met again this week. We have demoed Shiftboard with them. We showed them the functionality. We've written them into the SOWs to make sure they have their own visibility into the system. So they want to manage all their contractor staff through there. So we're not using disparate systems. So we've been in talks about that as well.
And they'll be able to send these standard county forms that we need these contractors to fill in, and even the training as well. So all that will be managed in the Shiftboard. And the timesheets that we get from the Shiftboard will be used for accounts payable as well as we pay to these contractors.
All the contractors have accepted that they're fine using Shiftboard to get their efforts.
Okay, I guess maybe you answered this and I just didn't get it. Is it your team though that's going to, once the contract's established and you're ready to set up the shifts and put the call out for staff, is that going to come from your team, or is HR going to do that and then you pick it up from the time that they're on board?
It'll be, yeah, pretty much as you said. Rita, I don't know if you want
Yeah,
to.
it'll be a concern that the users, and in this case, the operation, will let us know how many people do need budget. HR will get these people on board. Once they're set up and we go through now concurrently with the system to, for that onboarding process, they now will go to IT. IT sets up whatever it is that they need these people to do. Hours they will be working, location, etc. So it really is dual management when it comes to the staff, because we'll bring them on board, they direct their work.
And we've had several discussions about onboarding to make sure we're all on the same page as to what's needed from each team. And that is documented within the procedures.
Okay, great. And I'm sort of going to be all over the chart here, so I apologize for that. But a lot of shift board seems to also rely on the use of a device, right? So for the employee to check in and all that. So are those going to be our devices? So as part of the onboarding, is every member of the team, these contract employees, going to be issued a Sonam phone and that's what they will use, or are they using their own devices, or what's the device management?
So they can use any device in order to get in. It can be ours, it can be theirs. We will offer kiosks, like laptops, for them to check in for those of them who don't have any personal cell phones. And each team will have a team cell phone Sonam device. So they have multiple options in order to check in.
And then the Sonam phones, this is just a note kind of picking up from yesterday's test lab, because we're also using the Sonam phones for the boat center leads, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it just, you did a great job of showing the great features of that. I think that needs to be incorporated somewhere into the training modules, because as we know, one of the experiences we have in the current model is that we provide phones, but they often aren't used or are never powered on and stuff like that. So that it's clear that that's going to be a key communication tool for us, and so making sure that's part of the training. And you had a great training module in here for all your staff too, but that's the one thing I didn't see in there was the training on the Sonam phones.
So we did just acquire the Sonam phone.
Okay.
So we did have a lot of, we actually had the opportunity to educate ISD as to what FirstNet was. They weren't aware that it wasn't just for first responders. So we kind of had a lot of back and forth until we were able to get it through. So we just now finalized those orders. And so the vendor will be coming out on the 6th and providing training and those training materials.
Excellent, great. Okay. On the call center dashboards, you showed how you can have displays in the call center that would be showing activity. Are those dashboards available remotely too? Yes. So we can set up various different command centers where all of those things can be.
Yes. Their command center will be in our headquarters. Actually, the help desk area, there's a room, resident rooms. That's where these 3 ladies and 1 more person will be sitting. So 4. They'll be monitoring, and they have a monitor. Same dashboard can be given to you, for example, in your office or anywhere else.
Okay. There were some questions. This is going to go back to shift board a little bit. Some question in my mind just, and Rita, I'm sure your team's thinking this too. I just want to make sure we have adequate controls in place. So it's great that we have a system where you can go in and set the rate of pay. What we don't want, obviously, is to have that just available to any user, so that we end up with disparate rates of pay, or we want to be able to display that we've had good controls over that.
So it is only restricted to the admin or the manager, and it's only viewable to them as well. So we have other people who can see it.
The end users will just simply have an interface on their phone saying, check in, check out, type of thing.
Yeah, I'm more concerned just about with oversight or auditing of that, to make sure that if it is one person, that there is somebody doing quality checks on that, so that we don't put somebody in a position where it appears that they've overpaid somebody or under put somebody in a different rate or something. The Finesse system, is that a current system?
Yes.
It's a Cisco call
That's-
center that we use.
I wasn't as familiar with that one. Yeah, I think that's all I've got right now. I think really, really impressive. I mean, there's a lot here, obviously. I think you keyed in at the end of the presentation on something we talked about last time, so I do think going forward, this is all super impressive and really good. I think we do need to think about where are there opportunities to simplify it. So that there's a lot of systems here, and the chain of custody is all manual now. I understand why that's necessary. We discussed that yesterday as well. Just want to be sure that we're keeping that on our radar to further automate that and to really kind of figure out going forward, is it really the combination of all these systems, or is it one or two of them that work better that we can expand on in the future? But I think it's really good.
That's in the works.
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up on Dean's comment. I was wondering how much of that paper-based chain of custody process drives the setup and breakdown and consequently the model. If we go with paper-based, and if we actually can automate that, does that have a big impact on?
It will have a significant impact. This is where the times you're seeing, it's really that.
Okay.
Inside your model, you guys made the assumption of how long is it, did I hear correctly, 1 hour for the paperwork was added?
Yes, the paperwork it takes a very long time because you're talking each device, and then you're also talking asset tag, seals, and locks. And then as they're setting up, they're having to remove or put back on. So there's a lot involved, and it's a labor-intensive process.
And what we wanted to do initially, some months ago, was have something we could use those Sonam phones or whatever phone to specifically scan a code, a barcode, or something like that. It's just at this time not feasible.
But we are moving toward that, and that's one of the reasons why we did acquire the Sonam devices.
We're
The conversations, and we're
still in talks.
There's a strong likelihood after talking to the PMO, we will move in that direction. Wonderful.
So given that you guys are still using the E-20 and the E+10, and get that, what's the contingency as those days, not for all sites, but you're going to try to get the E-20 and the E+10, but we already see with the mock, those are getting pushed closer and closer and closer. Just that's a significant ask, and obviously, while the public sites are required to give us the sites, getting 2 months out of a location's facility for a year, 2 months out of a year, essentially what we're asking for.
So
How does the model adjust to that as we get fewer of those saying, yeah, you can have our sites for a month?
Okay, so as I showed in one of the first slides before I went into the model, it does have you set how many days are available, and then it adjusts accordingly. So I know as I've played with it for mock, I've been able to see how it does affect. And I mean, it really all depends. I mean, if there's a pretty good equal distribution, it's pretty much okay. It's when we see kind of when we saw it for mock, just a few, and then a spike. It can be. I'm going to let you know. It can be problematic.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, so the scenario says E-20 to E+10. But when I'm seeing the model, it looks like you guys did factor in setups of some of the remaining 750
Yes, we
to all the way to E-5.
Yes.
So this does factor in that 15-day window.
Yes, it does.
The back end allowing you to do that 750.
And what we expect to, I mean, especially with the primary and the general, I'm expecting, I don't know yet, but that the large sites will more than likely be government facilities and more amenable to an earlier setup, earlier drop-off. Whereas the smaller sites may be, your school, whatever, that may not be allowing us in earlier. So we, at least hoping that we can get into these larger sites or get them done and start immediately working on this medium, small sites as soon as possible.
So it's pretty clear that, to Aaron's question, that if we did have, say, less time for any specific scenario, it just increases the number of vehicles and staff.
It does.
That's just essentially how we would respond.
Right, but And that's what the model's for, so we can play with it and
It's a
see what
formula,
happens.
right? So-
I was a little concerned about some of the inputs into the formula that, understanding that some of this is guesswork because we haven't done it before, but when you said that there was a 20% unavailability rate from early voting, that I'm trying to figure out where that comes from. That doesn't,
That's the present model in the early voting, a couple of weekends that we do. I think that's the only thing. Again, these
But I'm not-
can be changed.
I'm not understanding what that means though.
Okay.
So I mean, so we had 10 sites or 15 sites, right? In November of 18. So you're saying 20% of those?
Someone wasn't there to open the door when we were scheduled to open the door.
Okay.
So let it come back.
It's been
probably.
it's a number
All
of
right,
things.
okay.
There was, we've dealt with network issues at the site, we've dealt with someone there to open the door. And if you remember when Tesla 2, I did a scenario where, I get in here to open the door and you're like, who are you?
Yeah, okay.
Or, in one case, we even had the truck driver accidentally left the key back to the EOC. No, it wasn't a complete delay, but it was about a 2-hour delay when I had to drive back to the EOC, get the key for the back of the truck and open that.
So just to clarify, for scenario B, the one that you kind of debuted or talked about primarily, that has an unavailability rate of 5.7, which you derive from the
AT&T, right?
Yes, so that 20% is not.
More realistic.
We wanted to, like I said, we wanted to look at 3 different snapshots to look at what would happen to the model if this happened. So we were kind of looking at, baseline, which probably never happened, what's expected, and what's a less desirable case.
So scenario C is the 20%. That's
Scenario
right,
C is 20%, with 20% call out ratio.
And then the other thing that I think is good in the model that we should just all be aware of is that basing the anticipated call volume on the 2006 election, that's very different equipment and a very different model
Right.
From very different staff. So I mean, it's all we've got, but it's definitely different.
And we acknowledge that, which is why, when we're talking about call center, we really set it up so we can get a more accurate timeline moving forward. So all the data, all the things you saw in the different sections, all are meant to feed back in the model so it's more accurate.
And we've been relying on Jeff from Smartmatic to give us information on, what they've dealt with in other jurisdictions, not necessarily counties but even the countries where they've done type similar deployments.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of that too, because there's the other VCA counties in California are not a good baseline because they're not using equipment the way we are. I do think that we may need to reach out to Travis County, Texas, where they do early voting election day in a vote center environment in multiple locations using multiple devices. And maybe Clark County, Nevada, maybe not just maybe to average those out.
That's a good idea. I did actually reach out to Lee County, Florida, which is southwest Florida, and I love their model. They have similar to us. They have 100 precincts and 10 early voting sites for 2 weeks. So, but they use ESNS equipment. I started talking to them last week and getting information from them.
The DREs or ballot on demand? DREs.
Are there any more questions for the group?
I just have a question. On Survey Monkey, it's the post-election feedback survey. Who is the intended respondent? Is that for the facilities?
It's for the actual workers.
Oh.
Yeah, so we want to, obviously we want to be able to retain people and have them want to come back and participate. We also want to make sure, like I said, we had to build really everything from scratch. So we want to make sure, are you getting what you needed to out of this? Were you properly equipped? What could we change? What could we make better? We just want to continuously improve our processes and our training as we move forward.